I have water. It's a little too late for me to have coffee.
Okay.
Hey everybody, John Spalding with SG Media Group. Today we have Jeremy Grandstaff with our next episode of Coffee with Jeremy, and we also have Kimberley Jutze of Shifting Patterns Consulting in here today, and they're going to be talking about collaboration and how we can help change makers make a difference with their clients and in their organizations. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Jeremy. How are you today, bud?
I'm really good. Great to see everybody. Thank you so much for joining coffeewithjeremy.tv. Coming to you once a week. The whole purpose of coffeewithjeremy.tv is to bring people together in an organic, virtual way and to have some true discussion about how collaboration, engaged change, however you want to apply it in your organization, team building, strategic planning, leadership development, wherever the topics take us is the conversations that we have here on coffeewithjeremy.tv. And I'm really excited to have you on with us today, Kimberley from Shifting Patterns. Let's give Kimberley a big round of applause for those of you who like to applaud. Excellent. Great to have you on board, and thanks again to John with SG Media Group, who's running our board today. Kimberley and I have consulted together before. We were working on a project actually recently featured on the SGE blog at sgendeavors.com/blog. And we worked with a group of people who were interested in creating a better economy for all. And part of the work that we did was to establish really the process that they might use to come together and engage more people in their conversation, more diverse stakeholders, if you will, in their conversation to create a better economy for all people living in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And so, Kimberley, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that. You were kind of more of the lead on that work, and so I don't know if I covered that in fair way.
Absolutely, I think you did. And so first of all, I just want to start off by saying thank you so much for inviting me to be on Coffee with Jeremy. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad to have this opportunity to be able to talk to you more about not only the collaborations that we've had together, but other collaborations we've done throughout our consulting experience.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I absolutely agree, and that was one reason when we were talking, I was like, we've got to get Kimberley on, because you and I could talk about, as we said before, we could talk about this stuff for days, so it's always just a matter of where is the conversation going to go. Yeah, BIFA was an interesting client, right, because it really helped us get very clear. We had the opportunity to use that client and the situation that they were in as a way to really design their change process. And now they're actually taking that and raising money with that process in order to, with the process we developed, so that they can actually get that done and bring the stakeholders together that they want to bring together. So I think one of the big cool things that came out of it was really a need to define what is meant by better economy for all. And I think sometimes that's where the conversations really could help. Go ahead, Kimberley, sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that was great about this particular process is that we started off by thinking about what is the purpose, what do we want to achieve. So when we worked with our client, which was Steve Schaff, who is the founder of Community Vision Partners, as well as the founding executive director of Chesapeake Sustainable Business Council. And if you remember, Jeremy, we had some conversations with Steve before we even brought anyone together just to get clear on what is the purpose. What's the whole point of having this better economy for all? What do we want to get out of this particular collaboration? And then from there, we actually started thinking about, like, who needs to be in the room? Who do we want to invite to this particular meeting to have these kinds of strategic discussions?
Yeah, I love what you're saying there, because it's something, the purpose, what's the purpose of what you're trying to do? What are the conversations you need to have in order to accomplish that purpose, and who needs to be part of those conversations is really that three-level prong that John has been trying to get me to write about on our blog for probably a year. So now that's done, John. But I think one of the key pieces of that is the purpose. And we, again, take a look at our blog. We had this really great insight when we were working on a blog around purpose, that really defining that purpose well helps us do a better job of making sure that we're keeping our clients happy and satisfying what they're trying to achieve, but also makes it a lot easier for us to report at the end of the project, because usually the purpose and outcomes is so clearly defined.
That's absolutely right. And the way I like to think of it is to get clear on the what first, the actual purpose, and then move on to the who, like who else needs to be in the room, and then focus on what you're actually going to do together.
Ooh, I like where you're going with that. I really do, because that last part is really getting into the plan or the agenda for what we want to achieve. And I think one of the things that Kimberly and I, and we've talked about this before on a Periscope thing that we did in January, early February, but really that design team is such a key piece of this. I even noticed that in our work in Nebraska, the design team it's so critical that they actually represent all of the stakeholders that are going to be part of that larger conversation. And if you can use your design team to your advantage like that, they can really bring that wealth of knowledge on what we need to accomplish together. So, Kimberly, what has been your most exciting thing that you've been working on with one of your clients lately? What has been something that's really bubbled up for you as something you'd want to share with the audience today?
Yeah, so one of the things I'd like to share is I'm working with a client right now that's a national network of immigration legal service providers. And so I've been asked by the head of that particular network, or the backbone organization, if you will, to facilitate a retreat for one of their members that's based in the Boston area. So it's been a really interesting process for me to get to know their board members better and to be able to co-design the retreat. And so I think for me it's been a valuable experience in being able to start off with building that relationship. I think too often in our work there's a tendency to just dive right into the task as opposed to taking a step back and building those relationships so that it makes it easier to then continue to work together in a collaborative way. So for me to kind of take that time out and to meet collectively with the board as well as individually with each member has been really useful in order to figure out how do I design a retreat for them that's going to meet their needs.
I really love what you're saying there too, because it reminds me of a conversation I had with one of our colleagues where we really determined 30% of our work on a project is what I would normally call org development or organization coaching, if you will, client coaching, getting to know the client. And I actually like the way that you put it, which is building the relationship. A lot of our clients we find actually come from previous relationships. And so there's an opportunity, every once in a while I'll just ping a client and say, hey, let's grab a phone call, let's check in and see how you're doing. And a lot of times we can also help to identify other areas of collaboration where we can bring that expertise in process consulting that we talked about last week on coffeewithjeremy.tv. Hey, John, quick question for you. Do we have anybody joining us so far?
No, not yet, but I've tweeted the link out and sent it out on Google+.
Excellent. Well, we do these hoping that we can get more of you to join. We also want to encourage participation on Twitter and by posting the live ad to jump on. If you watch this video afterwards and you see something that really sticks out to you or a takeaway, blast that out on Twitter with #CoffeeWithJeremy. And again, a big shout out to Kimberly and Shifting Patterns Consulting, who is a colleague of mine with us today. So, Kimberly, I think one of the challenges that you and I always talk about is how do we help people really understand what it is that we can do for them, and how do we help them see it as a way that they can tap into that wisdom or that expertise and process. And I'm just curious if we think kind of from the change maker's point of view, how is it that they can start talking about this type of change and really looking at things collaboratively? Maybe what's one thing that you do to start that conversation with your clients? And I promise I'll answer this one too. I don't know if I answered the last one.
That's great. Well, it's good that you're going to be answering your own challenging questions. So no, that's a great question. So I think where I like to start is getting to know them better and finding out what are their challenges, and then asking them, is this the kind of challenge that it actually makes sense to even collaborate on? I think that's always a good place to start, rather than just assuming that collaboration is the right answer, because maybe it is and maybe it isn't. It depends on the situation. And I think it's really important for them, if they decide that they want to do collaboration, to go in with their eyes wide open and really understand, what does collaboration mean? How does it work? And to understand that, yes, there's a lot of rewards that come out of collaboration, but there's also some risks involved as well, in terms of having to develop, having to attract all the resources you need in order to be able to collaborate effectively, the time that it takes to actually build relationships so that you can actually start working together, the risks in terms of reputation if people don't always follow through on their commitments. So there are some things to really be aware of. And also to think about the goal that you want to achieve. Is it something that you can do on your own? If so, then collaboration probably isn't the right solution. But if it is, if you're working on a goal that is outside of your own reach, then it does make sense probably to collaborate with other organizations, especially if they share the same goals and interests that you have.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that I always start a conversation with is, tell me a little bit more about your organization. What do you guys do? Why is it important? And really getting to know them as a client. I really model, I think, my sales approach after a colleague of mine, Adolfo Hernandez, who was the advocacy director for a large advocacy organization in Chicago. And he said, when he tried to reach into a particular community, let's say he was targeting the Latino community or he was targeting a low-income community, he could go to them and he could say, hey, I work for this advocacy organization, this is what we do, and get a terrible response. Or he could go in and he could say, hey, what do you guys do? What interests you? What's happening with you? How's this going? Great, you're having a block party next week. Could I come and help fix some people's bikes? He worked for a bicycle advocacy organization. Could I come and help fix some people's bikes while they're at the block party? Sure, that's cool. No problem. So he goes, and then he's able to have conversations with people around, oh yeah, well, this is what we do. This is how we could be helpful to you. This is how you could be helpful to us. But it's having the conversation that really helps him build that relationship. And then once they build that relationship, they can really dive in and ask those questions that you're asking, Kimberly. I think it's always interesting to me to look at the difference between, are they ready, and is this process going to help them become more ready? How much of that do you need to work into the process? I've got a particular client that we're working with right now that really wanted to get quick to the contract, like you were saying. And I said, no, let's explore it a little bit more. Let's even put a team together and look at exploring that together so that we're able to find out if this is going to be right for you. And I think that comes back to values and a lot of other parts of that equation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I wanted to kind of piggyback on a couple of different things you said. So one was this whole idea of approaching the particular client or organization you want to work with from meeting them where they are. And I think, as you and I both know, that's a basic principle within organization development. You always need to meet your clients where they are. And then this other idea of listening to them, like genuinely listening to them and showing genuine interest in what they're doing, as opposed to just saying, oh, here's the solution, just do this. It's really important to get to know clients as well and be able to build that relationship and take the time to really be able to do all that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm always I got the education in listen. very early in my career, and I remember a mentor of mine saying, Jeremy, you don't shut up long enough for them to talk. And, I was really offended by that at first, but it's so true. You have to, actually, that's why doing a show like this kind of scares me a little bit, because I don't like talking this much. Normally, I talk and then other people talk, and I get to, facilitate that conversation. So I think, I think that lends to really increasing the dialogue and figuring out how to do that. And I think I've lost my train of thought. So let's move on to something else. All right, Kimberly. Let's see. I'll start off this time. What's a question that you would ask me, Kimberly?
Yeah, so I think a question I have for you would be around, so when you're working with a particular client and they're really struggling with their particular collaboration effort and things just aren't going well, and so they're trying to do it on their own and it's just not working out, and there's all kinds of hurt feelings and people aren't getting along and work isn't getting done. So how do you then step into that situation and help them get to a point where they can get things back on track?
So I've got to ask a couple questions that you may not have answers to. Do they have regular meetings in person?
Well, why don't we approach it from this angle? Do you have a particular experience that relates to that question? And then how did you address it in that situation?
Oh, I like that. All right. Totally put me on the spot. I love it. Yeah, you know what? I had a client whose staff was in that situation. They were really struggling to figure out how to balance their roles. They had people kind of doing what they wanted to do, maybe not necessarily what they were good at. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of egos involved in the situation. It was a really rough situation for this particular organization. And I know when the executive director called me, she said, we're doing a larger process with you, but if we can't fix the staffing conflict, we've got a serious problem on our hands. And it really actually took getting them together. We started by cleaning up the office first. So, the retreat, I think, was Monday, Tuesday, and the Friday before, that Friday afternoon, they had to clean up the office, and they had to write down every single thing that they did at their job. And to a good detail, right? And we had the retreat, and I think the reason that I say the retreat piece of this is because I had met with each of the staff individually, so I kind of knew where they were as staff and got them to talk to me confidentially. And then we were able to design the retreat so that it was going to actually address those issues. Mm-hmm. We created a situation where each of them felt comfortable enough to actually bring their own issues forward. There wasn't one that I had to bring forward. They brought it forward on their own. I also would recommend trying to use a model, and I do not do this very much. It's by a guy named Lucchini, I think, Patrick Lucchini. He writes kind of the quick help books, if you will. But I read his 5 dysfunctions of a team, right. And there's a model that he uses in there that I found really effective when looking at working with a client like that. The short answer to your question, by the way, Kimberly, is you have to do it carefully. Mm-hmm. You have to talk to people individually. You have to give them a level of confidentiality. And you have to be able to know the process well enough that if you put them all together and you structure it the right way, the conversations will come out on their own.
That's absolutely right. So it sounds like the situation was able to sort itself out then.
They did, actually. One of the biggest innovations that they did, and I thought this was so interesting, a big thing that came out of the retreat is they used to put a traffic cone in front of, there were 2 traffic cones in the office, and you could take the traffic cone and put it in front of your desk, and nobody could interrupt you or talk to you. And they actually found that what was happening is there were some people in the office who felt like they couldn't concentrate enough to get the big tasks done. And so then they felt that they were constantly being overwhelmed. They were a very open office. They didn't have doors on their offices. So it was, trying to figure out how to solve that particular issue. Okay. I want to recognize, I want to actually try to go ahead and keep this a short coffeewithjeremy.tv. We've got about 4 minutes left. John, anything from the board that we need to know about?
Nope, nothing from the board that we need to know about.
All right, well, let's do this then. John, why don't you ask Kimberly and I a question to help us go out, and Kimberly, you and I can answer John's question and give some final thoughts.
Sounds good.
That's a tricky facilitator thing that you just did there, Jeremy.
I like to consider it empowerment.
Yeah. Yep. I would say, what is the one thing that you would like to work on for yourself over the next week as far as becoming a better collaborative practitioner?
Wow.
We'll go Jeremy first.
That is a good question. All right. I think for me, I would really like to zone in on developing my designs for a couple events that I have way in advance of when they need to be done. And the reason that I think that that's something that'll make me a better practitioner is because sometimes I think we get in this thing where we don't get an opportunity to think it through as much as we want. And I've got 2 really awesome summits coming up. One is on April 13th in Hastings, Nebraska, to increase walking, biking, and overall health. And then the other is on April 24th in Dallas, Fort Worth area, and we're going to be looking at advocacy for bicycle advocacy across the Metroplex. And those are 2 summits that I think need some extra special attention to make sure that the agenda is really solid. And so I want to challenge myself to give some space to do that and really see if we can come up with some streamlined processes or other ways to perfect that.
Cool, thanks, Jeremy.
Kimberly, what you got? You get the last word today on coffeewithjeremy.tv.
Wait, hey, Kimberly, hold on 1 second.
Sure.
Good job, Jeremy. All right, ready?
Great. This is quite the fun coffee experience. So for me, how I would answer this question is, so in terms of my collaboration work, I really tend to focus on relationships. So for me, collaboration at the end of the day is all about relationships. And the quality of your relationships are really what helps to ensure that your collaborative effort is successful. So what I would like to accomplish over the next week is to work on building stronger relationships with my clients. So to give you an example, I actually do have good relationships with my clients already, but they're more of a professional nature where we know each other on a professional level. And so for me, what my challenge to myself is to apply the work that I'm doing in terms of building healthier relationships by bringing my full self into my work with my clients and being able to share more about what's going on in my life with my clients so that we can have a stronger bond and connection and be able to build that trust and open communication that will enable us to work together more effectively.
Kimberly, I totally appreciate what you're saying there, because I think that that is the challenge sometimes that I have, is I get so caught up in getting the client work done that sometimes I forget to actually, not really forget to focus on the relationship, but I could make more time for it. There was a friend of mine who suggested every day you write down 5 people that you want to make sure you make a connection with on that day. And I've actually started trying that. And it's working pretty well for me, although I'll admit that sometimes the contact with someone is to wish them a happy birthday on Facebook. So I think I can do it better. But excellent. Listen, I want to go ahead and wrap us up today. A great coffee with Jeremy. Kimberly from Shifting Patterns Consulting, thanks so much for joining us, and thank you for the opportunity to continue to collaborate with you in a variety of ways. I know you and I are always looking for those potentials. So if you are wanting to tap into the expertise of Jeremy and Kimberly, we can come as a package deal. So make sure that you contact us. Let us know that. As always...
Not only that, Kimberly, thanks for your perspective today and for doing the show with us. We look forward to having you on in the future as well.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on your show.
I think it would be kind of interesting to explore maybe looking at like once a month doing a round table of consultants or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, I like it.
So if you like that idea, if you like something you've heard from today, tweet that to us with the hashtag Coffee with Jeremy. You can always share this link with your friends, coffeewithjeremy.tv, and find more episodes coming up. We're going to be focusing on the 23rd, I believe, installment on the 23rd of March on local businesses, and highlighting some of the local businesses that we know and that we support. I think it's a good way to give back to the community. And then on the 30th, we're going to be joined by the Executive Director of the National Physical Activity Society, and I'm hoping that we're going to get our primary contact from the Nebraska Department of Health on this month as well. So again, keep your comments coming. Thanks so much, John, with SG Media Group for hosting. A big thanks to you again, Kimberly, and the coffee's gone, so it's time to check out for the day. So thank you, Kimberly.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
All right, bye-bye.